When you hear about fairies, you're reminded of the sparkling image of Tinkerbell from Peter Pan. And if you're thinking about happily ever after, you've probably come to the wrong place. While scrolling through YouTube, you may have stumbled across the pure and cute angels or fairy godmothers that populate the Disney movies and children's cartoon characters. These channels have amassed a huge number of views, haven't they? But lurking behind these pretty fairy tales lies dark and disturbing secrets. Shocked? Some of you won't even believe that fairies have darker origins and were once thought to be more like the undead blood-sucking vampire. Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. Get ready to be scared about a thing that you've never experienced before. But do they have a dark historical truth? Or are the fairies meant to frighten humans? We are going to tell you all about the most disturbing dark secrets about your beloved fairy tales that you had no idea about. Let's get started. Throughout the year, many fairy tales that were told to you have drastically changed since their first telling. But what many people aren't aware of is how dark the original tales were. Fairies are a part of the long tradition in mythology from creatures all over the world. They're often seen as an intermediary race like mythical creatures living in supernatural existence, but parallel to us in many ways, somewhere between the realm of humans and angels. But early incarnations were sometimes evil. In 1887, Lady Jane Wilde popularized the Irish belief fairies were fallen angels who were cast down by the Lord God out of heaven for their sinful pride. And the devil gives to them knowledge and power and sends them on earth where they work much evil. In European folklore, fairies are considered to be mythical creatures associated with spirits. In many folklore, fairies are also seen as dragons, elves, and goblins. They can be as tiny as a seed or as large as a human. The word fairies was derived from a French word that means skilled women. They knew magic, had knowledge about herbs and stones, and were capable of healing people. Not only that, but they could also predict the human future. But besides being friendly, they can be cruel and dreadful as well. Fairies are immortal. They even steal human babies from their mothers and kill to make them lifeless, just like them. Fairyland is not like the dreamy world that we have always imagined it to be. It's a dangerous trap, and if you fall prey, you're doomed for life. No one can take you out of that world. You're trapped like a creature, and if you accept their offerings, you'll be confiscated as their slave forever. They will destroy all your memories so that you can never think about returning to the human world, and in that way, you are bound to follow their orders. Remember, if you ever get caught by a fairy, you should never hope to return. Fairies are also supposed to direct you to wrong decisions. They know everything about your future. Some fairies prefer to live with humans, while some did not. They feel satisfied and content when you're hurt. They will try to harm you deliberately. Some fairies prefer to stay in darkness. They're supposed to be the souls of the dead who are unable to detach themselves from their families. They also had certain wishes to fulfill when they were alive, but couldn't get them. So they roam about in a lifeless form in search of ways to fulfill their desires. Some fairies look extremely terrifying, with long ears and teeth, coal-black bodies, and wings. They have a specific language to communicate that no one can understand. There are many folktales about fairies from which we come to know that these beautiful-looking fairies are not only our friends, but enemies too. Whenever we see a fairy, there's this current innocent idea at first sight, which is very far away from the shadowy realm of the dead. Fairies are supposed to be beautiful creatures who help people in need and help them connect with nature. Despite this, there are many similarities between them. You all see fairies with their glitters and wands, but there's a very dark history and gothic credentials, and that's very surprising. So there must be a reason why we changed the whole idea of fairies. But how and when did this happen? From where did we start losing our fear of fairies? And how come they made their way to the children's fairy tales? Peter Pan debuted in the year 1900, where in society, it was widely believed that the fairies at the time possessed a shadowy spirit world. Victorians were fascinated by angels, ghosts, and vampires and believed that the fairies were the soul of the dead. The fairies were not dispelled. The concept of believing in airy spirits rose from the time of the First World War and the loss of lives and loved ones. They believed that there were occult methods of communicating with them. J.M. Barrie famously equated the origin of the fairies with children by saying, "When the first baby laughed, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces. That was the beginning of fairies." This quote is way too different from the way they were seen as the malevolent and shadowy creatures in folklore, where the fairies would steal children, drive people insane, blight cattle and crops, and drink the blood of humans. It's not just J.M. Barrie had no idea about this side of the fairies. He indeed had the idea of the dark side. Keeping that in mind, despite all the glamour and fairy dust, Tinker Bell is equally dangerous and vengeful like a deadly fairy temptress. Not sure if you noticed or not, but at one point, she even threatens to kill Windy. In folklore, fairies are represented as demonic or undead forces against whom humans need to seek protection. Folklorist Catherine Briggs, in her book Dictionaries of Fairies, wrote, "People walking alone by night, especially through fairy-haunted places, had many ways of protecting themselves. The first might be sacred symbols, by making the sign of a cross or by carrying a cross, particularly one made of iron, by prayers or the chanting of hymns, by holy water, sprinkled or carried. Bread and salt were also effective, and both were regarded as sacred symbols, one of life and the other of eternity." We can now link fairies to the vengeful dead and even the vampires. Earlier, the vampires were considered to be the bodies of the dead, which were animated by evil spirits. They came out of the grave of the dead at night and sucked the blood of the humans, destroying them in the process. This was exactly how English Oxford Dictionary defined vampire as. The History of Fairies by Dane Purkis includes a legend of the Scottish Highland. It includes a warning to people to bring water at night into the house so that the blood-sucking fairies would come to drink water to quench their thirst and avoid sucking blood from humans. Very old fairies, like the vampires, looked very pale, with their skin dried up without fresh blood. They also had wrinkles and looked old. Do you know about the Bauban Sith? They are the vampiric fairies from Scotland. They were very beautiful and were green in color. These banshees have hooves instead of feet. They danced the entire time with the victims, who were males, and exhausted them to the point of tearing and killing them into pieces. The only way to kill them, like other fairies, are by using an iron. There's another type of red bloodsucker, Irish vampiric fairies, whose areas are known as the Dearc Du. They were thought to be influential on Sheridan Le Fanu's female vampire tale, Carmilla. So when is the exact time to come closer to them? During Halloween. It's supposedly a time when the evil between the human world and the world of fairies becomes extremely thin. This is the exact time when you come to hear more about the stories that state the encounter of vampires with human beings. So if you are planning to encounter a winged friend this Halloween, get ready for a bitter surprise, because they might not be as friendly as you think of them to be. Be careful. It's a warning to the curious. Make sure to tread carefully and stay away from entering the ring of fairies. Have you ever noticed circles of mushrooms? We're sure you have. They are created by the fairies themselves. They dance around those mushrooms. So according to folklore, if you happen to step into such a circle of mushrooms, there are chances for you to become invisible. The fairies might make you dance around and around until you get exhausted and die before realizing it. So we would like to advise you to have a healthy fear of fairies. We've come to the end of the video. And if you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.